As much as Warlords of Draenor has been excellent so far, there are always just a few annoying little things that just get on your nerves, or perhaps even just some oversights that Blizzard have had that could easily be rectified. Sure, it's often nothing major or game-breaking, but a well-polished game is one that has hardly any of these little annoyances. Here's my list of 20 easy fixes, changes, or improvements that could really benefit Warlords of Draenor. Now, there are one or two things that I'm not going to cover in this video, for example, speeding up the animations when it comes to turning in your garrison missions. As much as they can be annoying, I do understand why they are part of the default game, and they are easily fixed with add-ons. Finally, this list is in no particular order. So with all of that covered, let's start off at number 20, which is to make traps more responsive. Now this is one that really does get on my nerves on a regular basis. Often you place down one of the traps from the barn, and the suitably injured creature is just able to run around in circles on top of it, still attacking you for upwards of 10 seconds before the trap actually actuates and captures the creature. And sometimes this lasts for so long that the trap even despawns, meaning you've got to put another one down and take a whole bunch of face damage from the mob, which is not particularly nice. And this is especially bad with the elite mobs that give savage bloods. If they keep their current implementation of putting the trap down and then having it sort of, pop or actuate when a creature stands on it, then I really do think they need to make it more responsive. Alternatively, they could just make it a 100% success thingy where you basically just click on the item to instantly trap an injured creature. Either of these would work, I just want something that's a bit less frustrating than the current version. Next, at number 19, I think that the Garrison Resource Experience Potions should be bind on account. Now, these 20% experience potions seem like a great way to burn off your main's excess Garrison resources when you're leveling up your alts. That just kind of makes sense, especially since the precedent has been set with past items, for an example, the Elixir of Ancient Knowledge, which you can farm up on your main and then send to your alts. I think it makes little sense that this experience potion should be locked to a single character. If you level up a alt using these potions, then you're really just going to be hurting their garrison progression later on, unless you very specifically tailor your leveling around picking up garrison resources from rares and things like that. This system just makes little sense to me, and frankly, they do need more ways to allow people to spend garrison resources on their main. For an example, I've got 7,500 in my main and nothing to do with them. I think this is just a very natural and sensible way to spend garrison resources. Next, I think that more Apexis crystals should come from garrison invasions. I think this is perhaps a bit of an oversight or just something that they kind of didn't really think enough about. Currently, the rewards from the invasions seem really tiny, especially given how long it takes to generate one and how they are weekly. Note though that I'm not talking about the chance of getting epic gear from a gold invasion. I think that's fine. It's mainly just the Apexis reward. What I would do is increase this Apexis reward greatly, such that getting a gold, silver, and bronze award would net you a total of around 1,000 Apexis crystals. I don't think that's too fast, as Apexis gear is really expensive anyway, and since this is weekly, it's not like it could be spammed or anything like that. I just think it would make a lot of sense, and I know that a lot of people do feel rather disappointed at the end of a garrison invasion when they notice that they just didn't really get that much from it. Next, I would suggest that they should add some sort of functionality for re-rolling Apexis gear or something to that effect. Now, I do have a few more points to make in regards to that. So, one interesting thing that the removal of reforging has done is it's made it so that badly statted items really do hurt. Previously, we could make a bad item an okay one via reforging, whereas now we cannot. Of course, I'm still happy that reforging is gone because I didn't think it was an inherently fun system. It was just messing around with numbers, which wasn't fun. Anyway, one issue that this has caused with the Apexis gear is that for many specs, only 1 or 2 slots of the gear is any good due to secondary stats. For an example, on my Marksmanship Hunter, I think only 2 of the Apexis pieces are of any use. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Now, Blizzard recently said that in hindsight, making the Apexis gear random and then allowing for re-rolling may have been a better fit with the Warlords of Draenor design. I can see a lot of people hearing that and thinking, whoa, randomness is bad, and yes, I do have a lot of problems with how randomness works, but if only 2 out of 8 slots are useful, I think I'd be happy enough taking my chances, given the fact that I would be able to reroll for a low cost anyway. So I think something to that effect would be better than having it such that most of the Apexis gear is sort of useless, and especially when it competes against heroic dungeon gear that can be surprisingly powerful if it's well itemized and warforged and all of that stuff. Finally, I just want to add that I think that putting versatility into the game just added stat bloat, and it has resulted in a lot of gear being kind of mediocre, because if something has got a secondary stat and versatility, it's likely not that good because versatility is not performing too well for many different specs. I just don't think it adds that much to the game, and it just sort of complicates things. The same goes to multi-strike unless you're talking about a spec that really makes good use of it, like say the Elemental Shaman. Another thing that I wouldn't mind is re-rolling dungeon gear. Now, I would actually add an item that could drop off the end boss of a dungeon that would allow you to re-roll the secondary stats on a bit of gear. And many of my points about Apexis gear and the usefulness of items to certain specs still do apply here. As we know, the stats from dungeon gear are all very random, and on top of that you've got the potential for it to be warforged, have minor stats, or of course have sockets. Often getting a poorly statted, warforged, or gemmed bit of gear is very annoying and frustrating, because it just feels like a squandered reward. I think it would be decent enough if the end boss, as I said, had a chance of dropping an item that would allow you to re-roll one of those bits of dungeon gear. This would help people deal with the various secondary stat problems on normal bits of gear, and it would mean that, no matter what, seeing a bit of warforged gear would be really exciting, because you would know that you would have the chance at least of turning that into a usable bit of gear. And of course, it would just be another reward for people to get from doing a dungeon, which I think is generally a pretty good thing, and it would allow players to have a little bit more control over how this system works. I know that quite a few actually feel a little bit burned because they've just had lots of poor luck, which has resulted in them just being kind of frustrated at bad gearing. Next, I would add a pure offline functionality on Battle.net. I know this is not necessarily a Warlords of Draenor thing, but it fits in this list. Many of us have requested this feature, and it still hasn't made it into Battle.net. Sometimes, just a bit of peace is nice, especially if you're, leveling up an alt that you want to kind of chill out on, or perhaps when you're raiding or in the middle of recording a video or anything like that. Just the flexibility of being able to appear offline is really nice, so hopefully that does happen. Another thing that I would sort of like is a second entrance to the Alliance Garrison. After all, the Horde have got the main entrance, and then another one. I think this is a really small detail though, it doesn't matter that much, but when I was on my Horde characters in the Warlords of Draenor beta, I found it extremely convenient to have that other exit to the Garrison depending on where I was going. On the Alliance side, it's perhaps just a little bit annoying. It's not a massive point, honestly, but I think it would be kind of convenient, and it's something that I certainly wouldn't mind having. Next, I would suggest that follower upgrade tokens should be stored in the Garrison mission table UI and not in our bags. As we know, these upgrade tokens can be a complete pain in the arse when it comes to your bag space. Now, thankfully they do stack up, but since there are many different kinds of these items, I think it does make a lot of sense that they should go into the mission table. Also, these items can only be used in conjunction with the mission table of your garrison, so I think it's completely reasonable to just have them be stored in that UI element and not take up any space in your bags. Now, I'm not sure if Master Plan is doing this, or whether it's a part of the default Garrison UI, but this would work perfectly with the system where you can just click on one of the follower's items, and then you're presented with a selection of the possible usable upgrades. Just throw all the tokens in there, take them out of my bag, and give me more usable bag space. I think it would be a very easy to do and extremely beneficial change. Next, I think we should just have, by default, an Open All Mail button in the default mailing UI. Yes, I know add-ons do this well, but sometimes if an add-on is needed to control such a basic bit of game functionality, I do think it's okay that Blizzard just have their own implementation. And with the Postmaster sending us more things than ever and various things like that, I think it's just time to add this to the default mail UI. Okay, so we're halfway through the list, and at number 10, I think that they should put more toys in the toy box. Now, the toy box is great. It's been really nice for both our bag space and our bank space, but sometimes it is really annoying when there are just some toys that, well, should be included in it that just aren't. And I understand why quite a few items, actually, are not in the toy box. But still, I think they should have a second pass on the items, and they should just get more things in the box. Despite their best efforts, bag space is still a large problem in Warlords of Draenor, and just having a look here is another way of helping us out with bag space. Another thing that I really think they should do is implement some sort of search functionality for achievements. The achievement UI is truly awful when it comes to usability. Sure, it's pretty, it's got that great Blizzard style, but holy crap, it's a pain in the ass to use. And, you know, adding a search functionality would just solve most of these problems, especially for some of the massive categories, like past expansion raids that are near impossible to search through without just being slightly driven mad. So just add search. I don't care if it's kind of tricky to do because of some bizarre implementation or something that you've got in the code. Just add it, please. It's such a pain. Okay, so this point is extremely small and pedantic, but I think that the disenchanting warning on the enchanting building table should only appear once. Every time I go to DE stuff with my enchanting building, I'm presented with a warning. And look, I get it being there the first time, but in subsequent, attempts, it's just an annoying pop-up that gets in the way of your usability. It adds nothing to the game, and they should just have it pop up once and then disappear. Next, I think they should really take another look at Garrison invasion generation. The invasions generate just in such a really frustrating way. It takes ages and your progression is just not at all clear to you. And plus, the criteria is just granting mobs, which I don't think is particularly fun. I think they should definitely just have a complete look at how this system works. First of all, it just shouldn't take as long as it currently does. Also, I think that they should communicate the system better to players. During the first weeks of the expansion, the Garrison invasions were this bizarre, mysterious thing that was very frustrating, and when Blizzard released their blue post about it, many people just said something to the effect of, well, that seems like a dumb system, let us know what's going on properly so we can actually judge how we spend our time in-game. Now, progress, I think, should definitely come from more sources, so completing follower missions that are related to the various factions, clicking on the clickable items during the daily Garrison quests, killing the enemy mobs, of course, and then things like completing the daily quests and doing dungeons. A lot of people do dungeons, and the dungeons are against the Iron Horde, or, the general bad guys, so why the hell does that not help us with invasions? Now, it could be that things like dungeons actually do contribute towards invasions, but again, the system is just so unclear that I'm pretty sure they don't, but for all I know, they could be, I suppose. It just should be a more clear system in a few different ways, and it should be faster. They are my main points, because right now, it just involves doing grindy gameplay to generate the invasion, which then, as I covered earlier, is often not very rewarding at all. Another thing that I would really like is the ability to choose our first large garrison building. I understand that the barracks is there as a sort of initial teaching thing, but I'd much rather be presented with a choice of building. A little bit like how in, say, any of the subsequent zones we get a choice between our two different outposts. Just give me a choice between the large buildings. As long as they make it clear that things like, say, the stable and the mage tower won't be that useful until level 100, I think that would be fine. Leveling up with the gearwork stuff, or the increased procs from the bunker would be great. And I just think it would be totally fine to give us that choice. I don't see any real drawback. It's just kind of limiting player choice at the minute. I mean, you've got many large garrison buildings that would be fun while you're leveling up, yet we're only allowed to use one, which sure does help us out with our followers, but also doesn't really add much to our gameplay in any zone past Shadowmoon Valley or Frostfire Ridge. I'm sure that this next one has perhaps got to a few people. The Garrison Mine Coffee and mining picks should stack to more than 5. This is a really small annoyance, yes, but it really does suck that these only stack up to 5, especially when it means that the minecart doesn't disappear, which means that you're running through your Garrison Mine thinking, hang on a second, is there anything useful in this minecart? I better go over and check, and then you're presented with an error message, and that's all kind of annoying. As I said at the very start of this video, a well-polished game generally is one that doesn't produce that many error messages or you can't do this messages. And I think that the design of this just means that often you see an error message, which means that your input to right-click on that item to pick it up doesn't work, and then you just think, oh damn, this has pulled me out of the immersion. What's going on here? Why can I arbitrarily only stack up 5 cups of coffee? It makes no sense. Well, I suppose stacking up 5 cups of coffee would be sort of tricky, but you get my point. It's just a bit annoying, and increasing the potential stack size would just be an easy to do and very welcome tweak. Another thing that as a crafter does kind of get on my nerves is the reagent bank, and I think that they should add access to this at profession buildings or ensure that the reagents at the bank are always usable. One of the major benefits to the reagent bank, I'm pretty sure, was that you were supposed to be able to put all your materials in it and then kind of use them remotely. They would basically all just be accessible to you. It does not appear that this works universally at the minute. You still effectively need to keep mats in your regular bags, which completely mitigates the bag space saving element of the reagent bank. Sure, it will save bank space in that you're not putting your reagents inside your bank, but the main thing in terms of day-to-day gameplay that gets the people is bag space. And it kinda sucks how the reagent bank doesn't help that much when it comes to bag space. They should either fix this up or just add reagent bank access to the various profession buildings. Also, there's a bit of an issue right now where tooltips essentially disappear. It's a small bug, but it's one that I've only noticed since Warlords of Draenor. Basically, your mouse over tooltips only appear for a fraction of a second. This definitely does need to be fixed, but if you can't get it to work in the meantime, you can just try pinging your minimap, or if that doesn't work, just type in /reload and that will definitely do the job. Next, I think that they should add an ink trader to either Storm Shield or War Spear. Now, the constant travelling back and forth to trade in Warbinder's ink for various other kinds of ink is an absolute pain in the arse, and the solution is simple: just add an ink trader to the Draenor faction hubs. In Wrath of the Lich King, Dalaran had a trader. In Cataclysm, Stormwind and Orgrimmar had a trader, but since then, no traders have been added to the faction hubs. It was annoying in MoP, and it's still annoying in this expansion, and they could very easily solve this problem. Also, on the topic of inscription, I think that we should really be able to queue up milling. Milling is perhaps one of the most frustrating parts of any profession, in my experience, having all the professions at, well, max level as of MoP. The default UI has you just clicking on the milling button and then clicking on the herb that you want to mill. This is very annoying, and it only mills 5 at a time, and since scribes need to process hundreds of herbs, it can be a very annoying clickfest that's extremely tedious. Now, of course, you can just use a macro to make it as simple as clicking a single button, but spending 10 minutes just clicking your hotkey every second isn't fun at all. They should just allow us to open up the inscription UI and just queue a bunch of herbs and then click go, and we could just tab for 10 minutes, come back and find that they're all done, just like with many other aspects of other professions. The good news is that at BlizzCon 2014 they said that this was a good idea, so hopefully we will see it at some point in the future. This also applies to prospecting, by the way, but since prospecting isn't a part of Warlords of Draenor, it's not really as relevant. And then finally, I would like it if we could pull up our daily profession cooldowns. So one of the main benefits of the work order system is that you can queue things up in advance, so that you don't have to log in daily, especially if you get the storehouse building. Now sure, keeping track of all that between multiple characters can be a little bit of a chore, but the flexibility is certainly quite nice. One of Blizzard's original plans was that you would be able to pull up a certain number of charges of a daily cooldown. This is actually something that Elvine pointed out, I think it was a few days ago on Twitter, and I thought it was a really relevant point. And the whole thing that Blizzard, meant here is that you wouldn't lose much if you weren't able to log in for a day, because the next day you could just do 2 of your daily cooldowns. Now, of course, that would cap at maybe 3 days, so if you just spent a week not playing the game, then obviously you, would be sort of punished for that. But I would love to see this charge system back in the game. Sometimes I'm just in a bit of a profession mood and wouldn't really mind sorting out all of my characters, but often that stuff is just work to go through, and if there was more flexibility in the system, then players could tackle it whenever they feel like doing so, rather than feeling like they must, else they will lose out. I just don't think that's a particularly fun way of having things. Anyway, that's it for my list. As I said at the start, many of them are relatively benign, but again, you don't want to have loads of error messages and, you can't do this being said to your player throughout your game. It just doesn't make it feel as polished. And I think that if these things were fixed, it genuinely would improve the usability of the game and be a little bit less frustrating. Now, of course, I don't have the experience of all of you. There's many more of you than there is of me, so If you have got anything that you'd like to add to this list, be sure to put it down in the comments. If there's enough things that I think would be really cool, then maybe I'll do a follow-up video, you know, in which I'll feature people's suggestions and give you a shout-out. So that could be kind of fun. Anyway, until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.